Today on CityCast DC, Julia Child is a lot more associated with Paris or maybe Cambridge, Massachusetts than she is with DC. But the legendary cook and writer actually spent some of her most important years in a little house in Georgetown. She would scrounge for ingredients in the much less foodie city of the 1950s. Her Washington years are the subject of a story in the new issue of Edible DC, and the magazine's editor, James Whitman, is here to tell us about it. Today is Monday, March 23rd. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, James, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks. Hi, Michael.
So you are the publisher of Edible DC, and you guys recently wrote about Julia Child's life in DC. A lot of people associate her more with Cambridge or Paris. What brought her here in the first place, and how long did she spend?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. We have the really have the legacy of her impact on American cuisine and American cooking, and really household, taking food seriously and cooking as a really serious discipline in the household. At the Smithsonian, the Museum of American History, they have done a really amazing job preserving that legacy and picked up the entire kitchen and moved it to DC in a really painstaking process. And we had an opportunity to spend some time with the curator of that collection and learn a little bit more about her time here in DC, digging into her legacy, which I think for many folks here in the city and across the country is really profound. Very interesting.
So what brought her here in the first place?
What brought her? She came during World War II initially. She was working for the OSS, is the Office of Strategic Services, which really the predecessor to the CIA.
So she was a spy.
Well, my understanding is that she was more an analyst and kind of behind the scenes, but credits the discipline of that organization, the kind of precision and painstaking work of organizing information for some of the ways that she really developed her career, and ended up meeting her husband on a posting out in what's now Sri Lanka, and returned to DC in between postings.
So this is such a classically DC biography where people moved here in huge numbers during World War II to be part of the war effort one way or the other. They met fellow people and married and sort of built lives. In her case, her husband's work in the government brought them to all kinds of different foreign places, which I guess is where she developed her interest, particularly in French food. Then they come back to Washington between postings and kind of bring the world with them.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they met in Sri Lanka during the war. They came back to DC. Paul, her husband, became a cultural attaché for the State Department. And that took them around the world, including time in France. And she really explored all those markets and developed that love of French cooking. And then between postings, they were back in DC, and there's a house in Georgetown on Olive Street that was their home base. In the 1950s, they did I think a significant remodeling of the house, and it was there that she brought her, I think, sort of first serious professional tool. She bought a professional range, a garland range that that then followed her around the world and ended up in Cambridge and was kind of a fixture of the cooking shows.
So she bought that here, but one of the other things of Washington in that era was it was supposed to be a city where the food was not that good. And so you have this woman here she's been living in Paris, she's been living in Marseille, and she comes back here between postings. How did she experience it? Did she experience it as a really dreary food city?
She definitely critiqued the American food scene of that era, but was, I think, pleasantly surprised to find stores around Georgetown that had specialty ingredients. I think it became part of that inspiration.
So while she was in Washington, how did she spend her time?
So she, started to develop her cooking skills and start to get very serious about that. Interestingly, in the 60s, she was writing for House and Garden Whitman, and covering sort of Washington hostesses. This was the kind of top society and where a lot of political and social activity was happening. And she sort of dropped into that world and, started to understand it, started to take, again, very seriously testing recipes for kind of hosted events. And in that, became kind of again very serious about her work.
They lived in Georgetown, which in those days was where you lived if you were a sort of young cosmopolitan couple. You had some money, and she's writing about the lives or the socializing of the elite who throw dinner parties. In those days, if you'd gotten an invite to one of those dinner parties, what was likely to have been on the menu?
So the recipes, I think, were really kind of classic for the day, and aspects and elaborate egg dishes, kind of pretty elaborate elements that I think with today's model of cooking would feel a little bit foreign. But she was both setting a tone for hostesses and really designing a little bit of watching what people were making, but also started setting the tone for the kind of dishes to be served.
So she was not an aspic gal herself.
Not necessarily. I think that's fair.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of interesting. Julia Child was the principal recipe tester for a cookbook called the Washington Cookbook that was written by food writer and editor Jose Wilson, and would later appear in House and Garden. And in that, she tested out recipes that came from kind of society women of the days, congressmen, the first lady, wives of senators, and other government officials, and lays out a number of dishes, things like jellied crab meat, and a dish that consisted of poached eggs on a pea puree laid out. And lays out a number of menus from that period.
And the other thing that strikes me is, what she, in her professional career, her career as a cookbook author did was sort of demystify things that a lot of people might have thought you have to have servants to in order to serve that kind of stuff at home. But I think these parties that, were sort of adjacent to her circle actually were a lot of people who had like cooks and butlers and stuff.
Absolutely. And across her writing, that transition of folks who might have staff actually getting their hands dirty and going into the kitchen, learning technique, and making it not just kind of not just labor, but a real sort of form of art, and making the kitchen a place for self-expression is, I think, for a lot of us, that's really the kind of the key part of her story that's so inspiring, that she was sort of elevating what had not been considered to be, kind of sort of high society activity, into something that, today, cooking is and fine kitchens in homes are very much the standard. And before that, folks ate, they may have designed a menu, but they turned to staff to actually prepare it. What she was doing was starting to get her hands into that, and teaching and encouraging others to do the same.
She's living in Georgetown. She's found some local markets that have the ingredients she's looking for that in a lot of places in the United States were not available. She's in a sort of social circle of a lot of people who travel a great deal and are worldly. What is similar to the DC that she experienced and the one that we know today, and what was particularly different about that city from the one that you and I live in?
Yeah, no, I think the wonderful thing about DC then and now is that it is a crossroads, and that between diplomatic corps and international visitors to the city, we have such a rich array of folks who are looking for foods from other places around the world and are bringing that to the region. I think what has changed is the added layer of waves of immigrants to the region from Ethiopia, from El Salvador, from other places in the Caribbean that have really enriched the region and our food culture. And what's really cool is, like, unlike a lot of other cities where immigrant populations are kind of concentrated in specific neighborhoods, across the DMV, they're very spread out. So you can find pockets of Uzbek food in Gaithersburg and in Arlington. And, there's really a tremendous sort of spread across the region. So that mix of diplomats coming from somewhere else in the world who are looking for Indonesian food, and folks who have moved here from Indonesia, who make their home in the region, has added really a tremendous amount of depth to what food is in the DMV. And it's really one of the great things that we try to celebrate with the magazine is that excitement, that energy that comes from such great diversity in the food culture.
Hi, CityCast listeners. This is David Plotz. I'm the CEO of CityCast, but I also have another job. I'm one of the hosts of the Political Gabfest, Slate's politics podcast. Every week, I get on mic with my co-hosts Emily Bazelon and John Dickerson, and we talk about politics and a lot more about other things that we care about. The Gabfest has been going for more than 20 years because the three of us love talking to each other, and we have an amazing community of listeners. If you like the open-hearted, curious way CityCast approaches cities, I think you'll like the Political Gabfest too. Stream it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
In those days, 50s and 60s, diversity in the DC area was kind of like, well, we got white people and we got black people. That's our diversity. Yeah. I'm sure I'm underselling it, but in the main, Julia Child is very associated with French food. Her time in France was very important to her. She didn't, from her time in Sri Lanka, come back with a lot of mastery of curry recipes. And do we know anything about whether she sort of dipped into foods of the Washington area in all of its diversity, such as there was at the time?
Yeah, I don't think we know all that much about that question. I do think at the time, the kind of the extent of more exotic, non-American, quote unquote, American food was French cuisine. And that was really the exploration that existed at that time. I think she obviously came back with a great love of French cuisine and then found the spots around the DMV that were able to kind of scratch that itch. And then obviously bring that culture, that food culture, to the U.S. and teach a generation of Americans about the kind of precision and the excellence of that cuisine.
In her own writing, and she did a lot. How does she recount her time in Washington before she moved away for the last time, relocated to Cambridge?
Yes, and she writes really fondly of the time. I think they were here, and Paula Johnson, the curator at the Smithsonian, definitely takes pains to make the point that this was a spot that they came back to periodically in between postings, and being part of that diplomatic State Department community, a lot of their circle came from that community. So there were folks who were traveling internationally, who had exposure to these other food cultures, and I think there's certainly some writing about her sort of warm feelings towards the city.
And what is that house on Olive Street in Georgetown still there?
It is indeed.
What's happened to it?
It's a private residence. It is not marked as a historic spot associated with her, but it is private.
Have you been there?
I've stood outside it, looked at the building, and you can take a look at it. It's a lovely home, and right on Olive Street.
You were never tempted to knock on the door and introduce yourself to the inhabitants?
I have heard that the folks who own it do fend off a certain number of fans who come looking for it.
And do we know if the stove is still there, or did she take it with her when she moved?
No, the stove definitely moved. The stove moved with her across their travels, and was really a fixture in their lives. So it ended up in the Cambridge kitchen. It was the stove in the TV show for years and years. And then when she retired and donated the collection to the Smithsonian, that was one of the key kind of focal points of the exhibit. So that stove is down on the National Mall, along with all of the other kitchen elements. And the kitchen's pretty interesting, and the design of it is absolutely fascinating. So she was incredibly tall. She was 6'3", and designed the kitchen with elevated countertops to reflect that. Her husband, Paul, was sort of a tinkerer and a little bit of an engineer, and designed these elaborate pegboards with sort of cutout markers for each pot and pan, all of the drawers and all the equipment that she accumulated over the years. She called herself a gadget freak. And was always buying different, very specialized tools. So all of that is arrayed in the collection and in the archives that they have there.
Long term, what do you think her legacy was in Washington?
So I think the legacy is sort of a broader one of impact on American cuisine. There are so many professional and home cooks who look to her and credit her for their kind of becoming interested in food and in a culinary life. So we sat down with Patrick O'Connell out at the Inn at Little Washington, and he specifically credits the art of mastering the art of French cooking as his training program. Did not go to culinary school, but basically worked his way through the cookbook multiple times, mastering each one of those recipes. I think for myself, learning discipline around different elements. So we have in our next issue, we have a piece about making a souffle, and it's a kind of multi-part exercise that requires a lot of patience and discipline, and it's not hard to do, but it needs to be done at this very specific pacing. And what Julia Child really encouraged was not to be afraid to try it out, to not let fear get in the way, because you're not going to...
Courage of your convictions.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And, her great sort of joie de vivre and humor in saying, go ahead, fail. It's part of the process. So I think she leaves that behind for sort of home cooks and for professionals. In DC, we have such a rich array of food culture. And it exists at the cuisine level. Obviously, we've got lots of fine restaurants, chef-driven locations that influences. And we've got, I mentioned Chef Patrick, but there's lots of other folks who that they credit. Similarly, food is taken seriously. I think we all know lots of people who cook at home in very serious ways, who have professional grade stoves and ovens and knives, and look for appliances and tools that allow them to cook at a very high level, and bring some of that sort of professional chef technique into their homes. And that's, I think that's celebrated pretty widely.
Before we go, tell us about the magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. So Edible DC is all about celebrating that food culture we've been talking about. We brought the magazine back in print last year, and have had a really amazing response across the DMV. We cover everything about food, from cuisine and chefs, small independent restaurants and international cuisine, hidden gems, a lot on home cooking. That's really focused on both recipes and technique. So how do you learn some of these approaches that are taught by Julia Child and many others? Makers. So we talk about the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. We've got this really amazing array of folks who are producing really high quality products across the region. And we do work on food access and food policy questions. As a magazine, we're really all about getting sort of behind the story. So we take beautiful pictures of the food, but we really want to do deep storytelling about the people behind it, understanding their journeys, what brings them to do the important work of feeding us. And we hopefully try to find the emotional heart of those stories and tell it with really lush photography and hopefully smart prose.
James, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And you can find the current issue of Edible DC at Each Peach Teaism, the Bethesda and Silver Spring farmers markets, and other local food businesses. It's out now. Go grab it. And that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.